Charter spokespeople will have recently come out and said that they are doing this project called digital encryption. And their reasoning is by encrypting all their channels, it prevents theft of service. And part of that process, they claim, is to move these local channels, the public, educational, and governmental channels, up into the 1300 band. We don't exactly understand how that has to do with digital encryption, but they consider it to be part of that process. And we can see there's monetary reasons why they would want to do that, which we'll get into. But the problem is a lot of folks who are used to watching those channels won't know where to find them now. And that presents issues for people who work in community television because that's our lifeblood. Folks who want to digitally tune and find these channels now have to type in 1300 or 1301, 1302 in order to find them. And for 30 years, they've always been down in the single-digit numbers adjacent to the commercial channels that we have, 6, 8, and 13. And mostly elderly folks who tune around, they don't type in the numbers. They just go channel up or channel down. And that way they get to see our channels. And our channels were put there by the Telecommunications Act of 1984. They've been there for 30 years. And all of a sudden, Charter says, we're going to move them because we want to standardize our systems throughout the country, have all the PEG channels on the 1300 block. And the other issue we get into is Charter says that the 1300 block is going to be their basic tier so that you'll be able to see the local channels without paying extra for them. And our concern is that they're going to treat the PEG channels different from the commercial channels, 6, 8, and 13. And you will have to pay to have a box to be able to see them because the smart TVs won't pick up the 1300 channels unless you have a box.
From my point of view, running a public access channel, our biggest concern has always been marketing, getting people to know that we're there. And the fact that we are in the lower tier and that we are among the network affiliates helps people out a lot find us. But our channel is unique. You know, we only have mostly local content, and most of the local content that we have is generated by people who live around here who come in and do their own TV program. And it's still really hard for people to know that we're both here to provide that service as well as for people to find the programs that they might be interested in our channel. So to put us in a place where it's harder to access us makes it that much more difficult for our viewers, number one, to discover us. And then, as Tony said, for some of our older viewers, the ability to really maintain their viewership of us because they're going to have to punch in a code. They're going to have to get a box, and I guess initially it's supposed to be free, but then it winds up being a cost overall every month for it. So and I understand that certain TV sets now can just take the higher signal, the higher numbers automatically, but with this they won't be able to. Everybody will have to get a box.
Yes, this is so prevalent in the country that it's actually been given a name, and it's called channel slamming, where they take a channel that's a local public education governmental channel and they slam it up into the higher numbers, essentially removing it from viewership, where it has been seen for 30 years. And they've done this in towns, specifically in Massachusetts, where their franchise agreement, that is the contract that the town has with the cable company, states that the local public access, educational access, or governmental access channel has to be on a certain number. They've disregarded that completely. It's too bad. We're going to move them anyway. So essentially in violation of the contract. But most towns do not have deep enough pockets to go after the cable operator in a court, because it does take a lot of money to challenge these business decisions that the cable operator is making. And towns are loath to invest in attorneys and the time it takes to go up against a cable operator when they do things like this.
This will definitely cause a fall off of viewership because most of the people that tune in to the cable channel to watch our programs are older people who aren't used to dialing into something else. They're not used to it. Younger viewers might catch a lot of our programs on the internet, but in order for people to even discover us in the first place, even to know that we're there, it's really important to have us among the network affiliate channels at the lower end, because otherwise they won't even know that we exist. You know, and we don't have the capacity, like those other stations would, to have market and say, this is where we are, this is who we are. You know, so I hear Tony really loud and clear that this is a kind of discriminatory, because we don't, you know, we are a public station. We're not highly funded. We're not affiliated with a corporate money that can say, okay, this is where we are, this is what you have to do, and send out all that information to people. Of course, people are going to not only be harder to find watching us, that already watch us, but we're not even going to be able to have people discover us as they do now.
Well, does public access serve any valuable function anymore, or now with Dish and Direct and the internet and all that, is the value of public access probably so small that it hardly matters?
The value of public access is the same value as democracy. People watch the station, they get the city council meetings, the planning board meetings, the school board meetings on there. They can participate in government. They can be an active citizen in this democracy. That doesn't seem to be so important to people who are in the business, who own businesses and want to make money on cable, but it's important to everybody. That's why the public access stations were created in the first place, was to give a voice to the people, which was supposed to be what a democracy was all about. So the relevance of the public access station is the relevance of democracy.
These channels also serve nonprofit organizations, folks that do wonderful things in the community. And we provide basically free advertising for nonprofit organizations, or certainly low-cost advertising. And the cable operators look at this as a potential loss of revenue, because they could be collecting advertising from these nonprofits, and instead the nonprofits will come to us. A lot of times we find that these nonprofit organizations help folks in the community who would otherwise be at the doorstep of the municipal offices looking for assistance. So our function in supporting these nonprofit organizations really does help to ease the tax burden in the town. Let's say you have churches or the Cancer Society or Red Cross or people like that who help folks who are in trouble, who are having difficulty making ends meet. And they come to the station and say, can we put a PSA on about our organization, or a slide even, about some function that we're having. And we advertise that for them for free, essentially. And it gets the word out to the public that these folks are there to help you. And I don't know how to say it any more simply than that, but by these availability of these additional resources, folks don't have to go to the town for assistance. We haven't talked too much about the Community Television Association of Maine, but there are 72 channels in Maine who provide some form of public educational or governmental television locally. They could be just a small room in the town office or a full-fledged studio like you have here in Portland at the Portland Media Center. They could be at the school where students put on the programs from the school or school board meetings. Or they could be a separate nonprofit organization that's hired by the municipality to provide public education and governmental access. So these 72 stations around the state that perform this are mostly run by volunteers, or certainly low-paid individuals, or people who already work for the town or the school district. And they have gotten together years ago, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and formed the Community Television Association of Maine, Ctam, which is a nonprofit. It's also an affiliate of Maine Municipal Association. And Ctam is a networking organization for the 72 channels in Maine. And we try to meet several times a year to discuss what issues we have and share resources and try to solve problems that come up. And right now, what Ctam is doing in regards to this issue, to answer your question finally, is to propose some legislation. California and Illinois already have legislation that prevents this from happening, this channel slamming, moving the channels arbitrarily up to a higher number so that the cable company can lease them to the highest bidder. And so we're looking at legislation that would prevent this. Charter has already started doing it in various places in the state. So we're not sure how successful we're going to be, but we're going to make an attempt at it for sure in the next session of the legislature.
Would it put the charter companies under the DPU?
You're talking about the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission,
Yeah.
which regulates phone and power in Maine.
Right.
And no, cable companies in Maine are not regulated by the PUC. The only regulation that they have is the local franchise agreement with the town, and also some rules and regulations at the federal level. There is a couple of pages of state statutes in Maine also, and in fact, if we do pass legislation, it will be a paragraph into one of those state statutes about cable companies. I think it has to do with consumer protection. So right now, there is no state-level regulatory agency that watches over cable operators, to answer your question. The Attorney General's office will take consumer complaints, if there are any. But there's no regulatory commission like there is for the phone and power companies. But we're going to give a good faith effort to bringing this to the attention of our legislators, and also the Maine Municipal Association and their Legislative Policy Committee. The backstory to this, of course, is, excuse me, the contract that the towns have with the cable operator, this franchise agreement, and I'm going to try to do this without everybody's eyes glazing over here, provides for these local channels, and it provides that they be put on, in some cases, on specific channel numbers. But nonetheless, the cable operators are required to provide these channels. And when they do that, when it comes time for the renewal of the contract with the cable company, the towns can ask for and request and get capital equipment to operate these channels with, and also operational through the franchise fees that the towns are allowed to require from the cable operator. The franchise fee is a rental fee for using the public rights-of-way. And the public rights-of-way may be these dusty spaces along the side of the road where the wires run, but it's the same in the law as the public park. It's like the town giving the cable company the public park to use for 10 years to sell their products commercially. And because they're using the public rights-of-way, the town can charge a fee for this. And it's called a franchise fee. And ideally, the town uses this franchise fee to pay people to run the cameras and operate these local centers. Well, of course, when these franchises come out for renewal, Charter or any cable operator sees this as a loss to them because they're going to have to lay out some money. And so if they can minimize the impact of these local channels in the community and move them off to another area where people don't see them, then they're not going to be in such a great demand as they are now. So I see this as a backdoor way of marginalizing public access channels and basically giving the cable operators a windfall, a cash windfall, because towns won't be requiring or requesting this additional money from them when it comes renewal time. If folks aren't watching the channels, then there's no need to have them, if you will. So that's kind of the backstory.
And I think it's a good thing that you brought up about the public right-of-way, because this isn't just the government making these companies do something for the good of the people just to do something good. The cable companies are actually making money from a public trust, from something that the public owns. So if you were to take a part of the park and lease it to a public park, just as the analogy that Tony brought up, and lease it for a company to make money off of, and the public don't get anything out of it, and then they want to take away the rest of the park, people would yell and scream and say, that's not fair. You know, it's not something that's being done out of the good. We're asking the companies to do it out of the goodness of heart or for community. They're actually making money from the public right away, and they're minimizing their obligation to repay the public for that use.
The town of Bristol, which is a very small town, has issued a letter of protest to the cable operator Charter when they were notified that this was going to be happening in their town. And I would urge any other town managers to also write a letter of protest to Charter if they feel that this is going to be a detriment to the folks in their community to be able to watch their municipal meetings or to have the public be involved in accessing the media. They can do this several ways. The website for the Community Television Association of Maine will be on the screen afterwards, and you can go there. And also, the town managers have access to a town manager listserv, and they can correspond among themselves on that. So I would encourage them, as individuals who are going to be impacted by this, to become active about it. And if they see a problem, to react and support the bill that we're going to bring forward. We've had contact with several legislators and senators who have been supportive, and we're going to move forward with it. In order to put these channels on the local cable system, as we talked about earlier, it's part of the Communications Act that says that if you're going to provide this service to the town and use the town's right-of-way, the streets, to run your cables down, then you have to provide these channels. Well, satellite services don't use the public right-of-way, so there's no requirement for them to provide these channels in the law.
But we found it increasingly hard through the years to get a good fix on viewer statistics. At one time, when early on, in around early 2000, we were able to get random sample of 10,000 subscribers from Time Warner to send out surveys to, and we did get a substantial response back. 39% of the people that responded said they watch public access every week. So at that time, but since then, the cable provider hasn't been forthcoming in providing that kind of a large sample. And the last survey we did was 5 years ago with 250 phone calls to subscribers, which was for marketing purposes statistically valid, but it wasn't something that we could really hang our hat on for convincing the cable company. The cable company probably should be interested in that information in the first place, because you would think it would be a selling point, especially if the public access station like ours is 24/7, we constantly have content on, and we have more and more local content being generated all the time.
And you would think that this is one card that the cable companies could play that they have that satellite doesn't. They could say, look, you get your local meetings, your school, your public access, and you don't get that on satellite dishes. Most people don't know that when they go buy a dish, by the way. But they never used that card, and I used to wonder why, but now it's abundantly clear to me that it costs them money to support these public access channels in the form of franchise fees and capital grants. So they'd rather marginalize us and put us out of business, quite frankly, than support us.